How about that now? That might be a little bit better. Thank you, Jonathan, for pointing that out. So all of that intro for the last 2 minutes has been in silence, and here we go for the tech world. It's really important for us. Well, let me start over. Welcome to our weekly devotion on Thursdays. And in all the silence with my mouth moving a few moments ago, I was talking about what it's like to be a parent in today's world. And there are certain challenges associated with it. And I took a moment there and I said, how many of you find parenting very easy? Raise your hand. And thank you, Jonathan. I'm glad you can hear now. But raising kids in our world today is very challenging. And if you would like to see where we are in this whole journey, we're actually on the third step in our parenting stages. And so if you missed any of our previous times, those would be available for you on Facebook or on YouTube. Just look for weekly devotions with Pastor Rich and then look for the dates associated with that. And I'll get to some more of that detail here in just a minute as to where we are in this whole parenting stage. But I was saying that we have a couple of young families on staff at Life Church, and so their kids anywhere from preschool on up through I think late elementary, and the challenges they're facing. And I was laughing the other day trying to figure out. Trying to do math homework is even a challenge, and I think for those of you who have kids in those stages, you recognize just how difficult it is because we learned differently. Certainly, I'm a Gen Xer, and so I'm just an angry Gen Xer, and we learned very differently how to accomplish math problems. And nowadays, it's just done differently, and that's okay. But it brings confusion for parents to try to figure out how do I even help my own kids when it comes to what they are learning at school. And so it's just a big challenge, not to mention the fact of the cultural pressures and the difficulties associated with raising our kids in a world that certainly on a generalized basis is not necessarily Christian. And there might be Christian underpinnings to a lot of what our culture still kind of is in. Largely speaking, all of that has changed and much of that is gone now within our culture. So what I wanted to do today is we are going to be walking through parenting, and this is where we have been. We talked about the discipline years, ages 0 through 5, the training years we hit a couple of weeks ago, ages 5 to 12, and now we're in what's called the coaching years. And the coaching years can be really incredibly fun years, but what it takes is to make sure that you got the first two right. And I think this is what becomes daunting, especially for parents who maybe are late to faith or late to really grasping how important their role is in their kids' lives. If you made mistakes in the first two, does that mean it's all over for you when you get if you didn't do well in ages 0 to 5 and the discipline years, does that mean that when you get to these coaching years of ages 12 to 18, that somehow it's a lost cause, so you might as well just throw up your hands and give up? No, I'm here to tell you, no, that is not the case. But what it does mean is that there might be other challenges that you have to face in order to bring your parenting to bear upon your children who didn't experience maybe as healthy as an environment as would be in a perfect situation. And again, none of us are perfect parents. All of us are works in progress. So as we get here, we get to ages 12 to 18, and I forgot to change. It says discipline. That should be the coaching years. In the coaching years, which are ages 12 to 18, the primary need of your kids during these coaching years is loving guidance. Let me say that again. The primary need of your kids in these coaching years is loving guidance. Because if we've got the discipline years right, and if we have the training years right, when we move into the coaching years, everything that they have learned as skills in those first two stages, now all that we are doing is helping them put practically, let me actually jump ahead real quick, and part of it with parenting is that our primary responsibility is practical practice, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But with us, if we've got the discipline right and the training right, then what we have is the opportunity to coach our children. And obviously, if you've got kids that are in sports, they have to learn the basics, which is kind of those discipline and training years. But then pretty soon as a coach, the coach begins to have a certain amount of joy in the way that he leads his team when those basics are just known by the team. They know what to do. They know how to tackle in tackle football. They know how to hit the ball in softball or baseball. They know how to kick and control the ball, or they know how to guard the goalie or whatever it is. When they have all of that down, the coaching years become incredibly powerful. And there are a couple of things when it comes to, again, we've got the loving guidance. And with that loving guidance, and this is from a website called thegodlyparent.com, and from somebody wrote a blog, 3 lessons learned in 3 years of raising teenagers. Number one is the importance of engagement. And this idea is that that as parents, we need to be able to engage our children. And so this importance of engagement, much in our culture says that our kids don't want to be engaged with us. I can tell you that's patently not true. Might be difficult, might have some challenges associated with it, but we've got to engage with our children. I was talking earlier with somebody here on staff and talking about TikTok and the fact that as parents, we need to be aware of what's happening on TikTok. In particular, we were talking about TikTok challenges that this granddaughter was talking about as a junior hire and what she was facing in these pressures for the current TikTok challenges, which I'm not exactly sure what they are, but I know that from time to time they rise up, and so kids want to start doing things in the TikTok challenge. They face that pressure in the challenge, or they face the pressure, the peer pressure to be able to kind of engage in those kind of things. But what would be different if we as parents were able to engage our teens in these coaching years to have the right kind of conversations with them? The second thing is, we got to stay engaged with our kids. The second thing, and this is closely tied to that, is the power of conversations, right? Parents, don't shy away from having conversations with your children. They desperately need to hear you, to hear your voice. They might not always look like they're listening or paying attention, but they are. And the role that we have is to engage in those kind of conversations as a powerful moment for us to be able to speak to our children. And again, I don't have time to go through and talk about how to repair a broken relationship where the conversations don't happen. We don't have time in this setting. Perhaps we can tackle that at a later date. But the power of your conversations is such that these become intentional moments for you to speak to your kids. Something that we did as parents, and certainly when our kids were a little bit younger, probably the early years of the coaching years, we would do something around the dinner table, because we would have dinner together as often as we could, and it's challenging in our world today. We would have dinner, and the things that it was called Mad, Sad, Glad, and perhaps you do this as a family. And if you don't, this is just one option to be able to get your kids engaged in conversation. And what it was is it's called Mad, Sad, Glad, and we would say, okay, what's one thing that made you mad today? What's one thing that made you sad today? And what's one thing that made you glad? And so we would walk through that, and in the conversations we would have, sometimes very funny, sometimes very meaningful, sometimes very hurtful. Maybe Shelley or I said something or did something, and the kids felt pressure from us in a way that was unhealthy, or whatever it was. So we had a chance to talk through those things. Something happened at school, there's bullying or whatever. We had a chance to talk about it in a safe setting around food. Food is always a good thing to have, especially when it comes to teenagers. But being able to talk to them through a simple thing: what made you mad today? What made you sad today? What made you glad today? Try it out. Let us know how it goes. And maybe you could write down in comments how do you handle conversations purposefully within your family. And then the last one there is this priority of unconditional love. Let me keep that up there for a moment. Priority of unconditional love. Our students, our kids, need to know that they are loved. They need to know that they are unconditionally loved. This weekend, we're talking about the Holy Spirit and baptism and the gifts of the Spirit. And the way Paul structures it in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and chapter 12 through chapter 14, right in the middle, he gives the greatest expression of what love is through 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and this just powerful example of love. Parents, we've got to be engaged in unconditional love of our children. They're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. But as coaches, we don't throw them off the team. We go, okay, let's work on that skill again. Let's jump back a little bit to the training time, figure out what went wrong, and let's strengthen your training so that we can have a better coaching environment. And so our kids are going to say things, are going to do things, are going to slam doors. I mean, that's going to happen within our homes. How do we respond to it? Got to have unconditional love. And again, unconditional love is not no discipline. That's not unconditional love. Unconditional love is no matter what, I will love you, no matter what. So parents, let's engage in those three things. I'll throw them up. The importance of engagement, power of conversations, and then the priority of unconditional love. And then as we get here, so that's the children's primary need is loving guidance. The parent's primary responsibility is practical practice. And in the practical practice, I mean, some of the things that we need to get right is we can have wrong thinking as parents. The first one is they're just kids, they'll grow out of it. No. We've got to make sure that we call, and again, this is that purposeful engagement, right? That we call out things that we know are wrong. And when we have the objective truth of the Word of God, and we've got wisdom from our own experiences and the way we were brought up, right? We can begin to recognize that our kids will not grow out of certain things because they become deeply rooted habits. It starts in the discipline years. If we don't get it right then, it builds into the training years, and then the coaching years. If we are not giving practical guidance to our kids, they're not going to naturally grow out of certain habits in their life, and so we've got to challenge them and push them, and that's what we do in those moments. And we got to make sure that we don't have wrong thinking. Next one, number 2 here is if I let go, it will keep the peace. What we mean by that is if I don't push so hard for my kids to learn a certain skill set, or if I allow them to get away with slamming the doors continually, if I allow them to get away with attitudes that are demeaning to others or bullying or whatever, that if I let it go, it'll keep the peace. The reality is if you don't deal with those things, the peace will not be found in your home. Right? Sally, this is a good one, Sally. My kids feel pressure once I start talking. Yeah, right? And again, this is all based on our relationship that we have with our children. Sometimes we do it well, and other times we need to grow up a little bit ourselves, right? Not every one of us had the opportunity to have perfect parents ourselves. But we cannot put ourselves in a position where we give up on the pressure of just letting things slide, right? It's easy for us to think if we let it slide, that'll keep the peace. The problem is if we let it slide, especially in these coaching seasons, then we reinforce bad habits if we just let things slide. And then pretty soon, the peace that we should have within our homes, we get frustrated because we're just letting it slide. We get frustrated because we don't feel like our kids are reading our minds and knowing what we want from them because we're not willing to stand up and say, no, this is unacceptable within our home. That actually ultimately leads to peace rather than you letting everything slide, which is the easier route, because that's never going to lead to peace. And then the last thing is, I still have plenty of time. I can deal with it later. This is a wrong thinking that parents, we can get ourselves into in these coaching times in these stages. I still have plenty of time. I can deal with it later. The best time to deal with it's now. And I got to tell you, in parenting, I probably would let things slide. I'll just let it go, keep the peace. That's just something that I did. And then, and that last statement again, let me pull it up there. I still have plenty of time. We can deal with it later. Not always the healthiest thing, again, to do as parents is to say, I got plenty of time. I can deal with it later. The best thing to do is to make sure that you keep a short record of issues that need to be dealt with. Because again, if you let things slide, let it go, or if you think you've got plenty of time, I can deal with it later, later never comes. And as parents, yeah, I see your comment there, dealing with it is now, not later. Absolutely. There's actually one of the benefits of dealing with it now, just off the top of my head, is that you don't forget what put you in that position to begin with, where you were frustrated. Right. Sometimes in frustration, we don't deal with things like, I just can't deal with it right now, so I'm just going to let it sit and I'll deal with it later. Obviously, we can't be in frustration dealing with things. We've got to make sure that we're in the right emotional state and all of that. But we cannot let it be something that builds up. And so we get to the point where we blow up because we haven't dealt with it, because we think we're keeping the peace, or because we think we can deal with it later. Deal with it now so that it doesn't build up either in your life, and it doesn't build up in your kids' life either, because they feel it as well. And pretty soon they think they can get away with stuff. But in the coaching stage, let me go back to this real quick. In that coaching stage, these teenage years are absolutely vital so that we prepare ourselves for what comes next. And as you can see, there is a little hint, the friendship years, right? The goal of us as parents is to raise children that love Jesus. Hopefully the children are wildly in love with us as parents as well, so that when we get after high school years are done and into the college years, we really have an opportunity that there is a deep friendship that's happening within our homes. And it doesn't always work out that way. I get it. I know that it's difficult to parent. But the goal is that when we reach those stages, that we do have our children who are now friends with us, our children that now want to be around us and respect us and listen to it, even advice in parenting ourselves as we try to help them parent our grandchildren well, right? We want our grandkids to be fantastic. And so that takes our children parenting them well. And I do want to say again, it's never too late to start parenting right. And so if discipline needs to be revisited, please feel free to lay down those rules and guidelines for living so that we have the right worldview, right? That's what it's all about in those early stages. And then we move to this point of training and then coaching our kids. So I know I'm just giving a lot of overview. We're not really going into a ton of super deep details on how to actually make this happen. But I want to challenge us as parents to see that our role is absolutely vital. The culture around us is devaluing parents, and as if the state can offer something that we can't offer as parents. We know our children, and I believe we know our children best. As long as we recognize that we are imperfect and fallible and broken ourselves, we can help our children come to grips with the reality that they themselves are not perfect, even as much as they want to tell us they are at times, in the way that they live their lives. So hopefully you found this helpful. I know for Shelley and I, as we've raised our 4 kids, we haven't always done it right, but we've tried, right? We've done our best in moments where we've screwed up. We've let our kids know, hey, we probably shouldn't have done that, or forgive us for the way that we handled that, or help us to do better in the future as we grow in our friendship ultimately, as our kids now are almost all graduated from high school. And so very excited about these stages. Hey, before I go, I wanted to make sure that if you're not a part of a church, you don't have a church home, love to have you be a part of Life Church Utah. If you're here in the Salt Lake Valley, our West Valley campus is on the corner of 4700 South and Bangerter Highway. We'd love to have you. Services are at 9:30 and 11 a.m. Those are our English services. At 1 p.m., we have a Spanish language service at our West Valley campus. And if you are watching us from over in Tooele, Stansbury, kind of over in that area, across the Oakers from the Salt Lake Valley, if you're in the Tooele Valley, we do have a campus in the Tooele Valley. You can always check us out and those services are at 11 a.m. on Sundays. You can always check us out for all the information at lifechurchutah.com. This Sunday, we're going to be talking about the Holy Spirit. This is a continuation of our What We Believe series. And we're going to be digging into some areas that are a little tough to talk about as we talk about the gifts of the Spirit. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Romans chapter 8, and we're going to be digging into what those gifts are. We're going to talk about the baptism in the Holy Spirit, that subsequent experience that we see recorded in Acts chapter 2 after Jesus tells his disciples to wait in Jerusalem for the promise of the Father. So what is that? What is tongues? What is that baptism in the Spirit? And then what are the gifts of the Spirit that are available to us who are believers in Jesus Christ by faith? So hope to see you this weekend. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for taking a bit of time out on your Thursday afternoon, and I really hope to see you this weekend, Sunday, at Life Church Utah, either West Valley campus or Tooele campus. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.